Gobta's girlfriend. I mean, now one thing that I did want to point out that was not included in the manga was the fact, what's going on, Tensura fans? We've been waiting for a whole month for the chapter to release, and it is finally here. Rimuru's long-awaited interaction with the new 3 primordial demons. It has finally dropped, and man, it did not disappoint. In today's video, we're going to be diving into chapter 135 of the That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime manga, and I'll be breaking down everything that happened page by page, and most importantly, pointing out the differences between the light novel and the manga. We'll go over what was changed, what stayed the same, and what those changes might mean going forward in the story. Now, this chapter contains a lot of crucial information to the storyline, so 100% an incredibly important chapter, which is why I will go deep into the lore and what it represents without giving any spoilers for what is to come later on. Now, that's enough of me babbling, let's just get into the chapter. On the first page, we see Diablo basically introducing the 3, and we get a little bit of an internal dialogue from the Demon of White. She seems to notice immediately that it is a slime taking the form of a person, but she doesn't really believe that someone could charm one of the Primordials like that, and if he doesn't live up to the expectations, she is going to end him. Then we get internal dialogue from Violet, and she mentions that he is hiding his magic heal count, but that's nothing really impressive because at the end of the day, all of them are doing that right now. Finally, it's the Yellow Primordial's internal dialogue. She says if she really were trying to hide her presence, there's no one that can tell that she's doing it. And then she tried to challenge Rimuru by using her haki against him, but he isn't even fazed by it. Like, he didn't even notice that she was doing that. Rimuru asks if they're all archdemons and says that the placeholder material bodies that they crafted are perfect, saying that they look like regular humans, which completely surprised all of them since Rimuru wasn't really supposed to notice any of this. The white demoness says he did it like it was perfectly normal for him, and with that, it's just one look, which is impressive. Then Diablo says that Rimuru basically picked up on the ruse, saying that they were doubtful of Rimuru's power, so he granted them the chance to test him and apologize to Rimuru for it. Now let me stop the analysis of the chapter real quick for a second, and the reason that I want to do that is to point out that there have been a few changes between the manga and the light novel up until this point. If you watched my previous video on this, you should have seen how I pointed out that everything of this entire interaction between Diablo and the Primordials in the demon realm was entirely newly created for the manga only. It was new material. The light novel never actually covered any of this. Now this part right now, this entire interaction, they completely changed how it all went down in the manga. They made it seem like the Primordials were basically doing their own test on Rimuru to make sure that he was worthy of someone that they could pretty much trust or serve at this point. However, in the light novel, it wasn't necessarily this way. There was no thought process for them. Or at least we didn't get to see anything because everything that we saw was the internal monologue that Rimuru was having with himself. The only thing that we were told was that Diablo actually forced them to conceal their identity and magic heal count. It wasn't necessarily that they wanted to test Rimuru, but it was that Diablo forced them to do it. Like, for example, that entire interaction of Yellow Primordial trying to use her haki to impress Rimuru, then decided to add that out of nowhere because that wasn't in the light novel either. Which I'm not really mad about. At the end of the day, it's new content and it's pretty interesting. I just really like the little hint of authenticity from each of them that we're getting from their internal dialogues. But let's just continue with the review of the entire chapter. Now, the Yellow Primordial mentions that Rimuru is really not intimidated by any of them, and he's not even trying to curry any favors out of them either. He's just super calm around them. And then Violet makes sure to let us know that he treats Noir like he's just a casual friend, nothing else. Which, again, this should be weird because this is a primordial demon. At this point, the white one seems like she really wants to say something. She addresses Rimuru and says that it's really nice to meet him and she regrets that she doesn't really have a name, but she looks forward to working with him. And she's quite amazed by his keen insights and understands why is it that Black adores him. In fact, ever since she came in, she could not stop her heart from racing, which is wild to me because why would she be saying that to Rimuru? Then her and Violet proclaim that their allegiance to Rimuru along with their 200 servants. Yellow also pledges her allegiance, Rimuru accepts, and then all of them just basically stay under Diablo's command. Then we get to the chapter cover, which is a double spread of all of them, and Rimuru talking to himself as if it wasn't for Raphael, they would have tricked him. And he also points out that they're all archdemons and nobody said Diablo would be bringing those in. Now, the reason why we're getting a little bit of internal dialogue between Rimuru with himself, basically saying that if it wasn't for Raphael cluing him in, he would have gotten tricked by them, is because this part was actually omitted from the manga. In the light novel, Rimuru and Raphael actually have a full-on conversation where Raphael basically explains everything that there is to know regarding the hierarchy of the demons and the demon realm, and how demons are born, how they evolve, how there's a hierarchy when it comes to the nobility and status and titles. So all of this, Rimuru knew it beforehand, as well as Raphael being able to tell him how old the demons are and what that represents to how much power they have. So that's why Rimuru already knew that all of these 3 demonesses were archdemons, because it was basically something that was completely skipped in the manga, but the light novel touched it up with a lot more information. Another short portion of the dialogue that was completely skipped in the manga was whenever Diablo first met with Rimuru. Before he introduced them to him, Diablo mentioned that he brought along 7 worthy demons of serving Rimuru, which Rimuru started freaking out because Diablo had actually told him to prepare 1,000 bodies, and that's what Rimuru had prepared for. But when Diablo said that he only brought 7, Rimuru was kind of disappointed from this. But here's the thing, he omitted the fact that each one of those Primordials was coming with 200 demons of their own, and that there was one that was coming with 100 of his own. And Rimuru never really found out about this throughout the entire conversation. He was kind of just thinking to himself sometimes, oh, you promised me 1,000 and I prepared 1,000, but it was only this what you actually brought me. So after all, the demoness actually mentioned that they have 200 each. And Rimuru was like, oh wait, that's actually 600. Never mind, I actually do have enough. So not necessarily anything critical as far as the story goes. It's a little bit of information here and there that was omitted from the manga, but I just thought it was cool to let you guys know. Now the scene changes and now we are inside the labyrinth, and Diablo is basically standing in front of an empty floor and says that he grants them permission to manifest. Dark magicules start to appear, and then we start to see silhouettes of people forming in front of Rimuru. Rimuru saying whoa because he's obviously surprised about all this. And then we see 6 prominent demons show up, who are also archdemons, but one of them is basically beat up to a pulp that is the 7th. Now these are the 6 that are going to be the main followers of the 3 Primordials, and the last one is the one that Diablo was basically beating up non-stop. So he kind of got some interest into this person and brought him up. Now Rimuru is confused how these could all be archdemons because Diablo said that there are 6 assistants to the 3 girls, along with 1 greater demon he picked himself, that he found some interest in the guy. Now let me explain why in fact Rimuru having so many archdemons is actually a really big deal, because the manga did a very poor job at explaining it and completely overlooked the importance of this scene right here. When you compare it to a greater demon summoning, the chances of calling an archdemon was pretty much next to impossible. 1 archdemon alone is a massive force to be reckoned with, to the point that oftentimes a summon would fail even after a great sacrifice. If humans were to actually try to summon them, they would have to prepare a huge ritual to the size of a national level. Let me say that again. If humans wanted to summon an archdemon, they would have to prepare a national level sacrifice. And here Rimuru right now is having 9 of them just standing right there waiting to serve him. That is just wild. Moving on, we get a sick double spread of a bunch of demons where Diablo says there's approximately 700. Now this is something that was actually skipped and is the last 100. As I already mentioned before, each one of the 3 demonesses brought 200 along with them, totaling 600. What the manga didn't say was the guy that Diablo kept beating up and actually brought along because he was interested in him was a greater demon who had 100 servants of his own, and that was where the total of 700 came from. Now we get a little bit of dialogue of what's going on between Rimuru's mind, because those 700 demons are enough of a headache, but hey, they just got now 6 archdemons and he needs to control them on top of the other 3. And then he basically asks himself, is there some kind of pecking order when it comes to official titles? To which Raphael obviously responds saying that the demons are limited by how far their magicules can grow, archdemons being at the top of the class. However, with their limited lifespan, demons build up more and more battle experience as the years pile up, leading to a difference in strength even amongst fellow archdemons. And what that actually means is that demons are premeditated to how strong their magicules can grow. However, their experience is almost as important, because however long they live, the more battle experience they have, the stronger they become, not necessarily because of the magicules. So then Rimuru asks Raphael if these 3 girls have lived longer than the 6 archdemons, and Raphael says that yes, by at least a millennium. The strength of those demons are evaluated based on how long they have lived. Certain titles are used to express the difference between the levels of strength, and the subject Diablo, along with the other 3, are all estimated to be amongst the ruling class. So here's where Raphael is basically giving Rimuru small hints here and there about who they actually might be dealing with, but Rimuru is just completely clueless and not picking anything up. He just brushes it off as if it was the equivalent of kings and queens because of how old they are, and then Raphael is just like, sure, you could say that, without actually telling him what they actually are. Then Diablo starts exaggerating as usual, saying that they all begged to join Rimuru, which everyone knows is a lie, and Rimuru even notices like, yeah, you actually beat the crap out of them or you forced them to come here. Then the little guy says if his master actually chose him to serve him, then they will do the same without even questioning it, and they all kneel in front of Rimuru. And we get a sick panel of basically every single demon behind them doing the exact same thing and everyone kneeling to Rimuru. We switch over scenes and now we're in the laboratory because Rimuru needs to grant them their physical bodies. As he is preparing the vessel, Dino, Veldora, and Ramirez show up asking what is going on. Rimuru mentions that Diablo brought some friends along and that they have been alive for over a millennium, and Dino is surprised, saying that a lot more than that, he thinks. Raphael cuts in and it's like, yeah, I actually said at least a millennium. He could easily mean over 30 millennium. And Rimuru jokes that he wouldn't ask a lady her age, then says that their age doesn't really matter as long as they work for him. Diablo says it's not the years in the life, but the life in the years. Then Rimuru turns on and it's about naming them, which Dino seems surprised about, and Veldora and Ramirez tell him that this is just a normal Tuesday for them. So Rimuru's thinking that he is gonna stick to exotic cars. He names them Testarossa, Ultima, and Carrera. The capsule then cracks, and Dino points out how the magic energy coming out from them is something that is not even a demon lord like Carrion could do anything to them. Testarossa is incredibly happy of being given a name and obviously more power. She pledges her absolute loyalty, so does Ultima, and then Carrera, and they also notice that it basically states that they evolved into demon peers. That is actually a very important detail to note. But he mentions how he still needs to name everyone else, and those three were just the beginning, but they drained him. And we get the name of the remaining demons, at least the important ones, which are Moss, who also evolved into a demon peer from Testarossa's side, a Grand Duke who hasn't been defeated in over a dozen of millennia, Byron, Ultima's assistant, a Marquise with over 4,000 years old and has been beat by Moss many times, Agera, a Viscount who is really known for using a katana and hasn't lost a battle since 300 years ago when he first joined Carrera. Gobta's girlfriend, Esprit, a Viscount who hasn't lost in 500 years. Zonda, a Baron undefeated for 300 years. Cien, a Baron undefeated for 300 years as well. And Venom, who used to be a greater demon but evolved into an archdemon and has been undefeated for a couple of hours since Diablo recently just beat his ass to a pulp. However, Venom was actually born with a unique skill, and that is something that is very unique, no pun intended. Although he hadn't really been around for too long, his rate of growth has actually been very astonishing. Then Rimuru is surprised that so many of them turned out into demon peers. He wanted to see some more political people, but mostly what he seems to have gotten is just a shitload of manpower. Raphael mentions that the rest of them can be named with the magicules in the incubation capsules, and Rimuru just lets them be handled by Diablo. And that is how the Black Numbers, or the Black Corps, was formed, the strongest branch in Rimuru's military. Now, one thing that I did want to point out that was not included in the manga was the fact that the vessels for Carrera, Testarossa, and Ultima were very different. You see, even though they were also archdemons like the rest of their subordinates, Rimuru didn't want them to be exactly the same as everybody else. Just because they were special, they had subordinates. So their vessels, Rimuru actually ended up adding gold to them. Obviously, this isn't necessarily crucial information to the story, but it's just a very small detail that I like to point out myself. Rimuru did create 3 vessels out of gold for them, and they were very special in that sense. Now, scene changes, and once again, we're in the library, and Testarossa is saying to Diablo that she understands why he is so enamored with Rimuru. Ultima just kind of agrees, and Carrera's doing the same thing, but looking through scrolls. She points out how he basically saw right through them, and didn't even consider them a threat at all. She does seem to know who Demon Lord Dino is. Then Testarossa points out that it's just so much more entertaining to watch Rimuru, what he is about to do and what he's going through, than the games that they were basically playing with each other for control, trying to destroy other nations and jostling over territory. Ultima agrees and says that this is also going to be a lot more fun than what they were doing, just torturing demons. And Carrera points out how she tried to intimidate Rimuru using her menace or her hockey, and it didn't even face him. We get a little bit of comedic moment from Diablo being all like, oh, I almost killed you when you tried to do that, which again, this wasn't really part of the light novel, but I like the comedic effect and the information that we're getting added into the manga. And then he tells them that he basically is sure that they're never going to try that disgraceful thing again, but he will expect them to follow all of their orders. And the 3 of them just kind of get really excited and happy to be part of the group now, which is funny as hell to me. Interestingly enough, however, this conversation is a lot different than what happened in the light novel because, as a matter of fact, Testarossa was the one that was threatening Diablo and telling him that she was about to kill him, but the only reason that she didn't was because she got a little bit curious towards Rimuru. And this part of the conversation was entirely skipped and changed in the manga, and I thought that was interesting. I just wanted to point it out to you guys. A few days pass and he assigns them their jobs and responsibilities. He has 3 jobs available: a diplomatic attaché, a chief prosecutor to investigate evil, and a chief justiciary for fair and balanced judgment. They all seem super excited about one specific job. Testarossa wants to be the diplomatic officer, Ultima wants to be the prosecutor, and Carrera wants to be the judge, which I think is great foreshadowing to what her ultimate skill is going to be, but I'm not going to dwell into that right now. Rimuru then tries to explain to Testarossa what it means to be a diplomatic attaché, but it pretty much, she already knows and understands how to do the job. Now, Testarossa is very eager to start, and Diablo even vouches for her being a great talent for that specific job. Then Ultima pretty much proves that she is the best prosecutor as she already memorized all of the laws, and obviously, last but not least, Carrera proves herself. Rimuru has all of them, and that is all for that specific meeting. At which point, they were all excelling at their jobs and doing their very best, and Testarossa points out how all of the nations on the opposing sides are some reluctant and some are very welcoming towards them. Rimuru is wondering how is it that she knows all of that, and she calls out to Moss, her assistant, and Moss lets him know that the information hasn't really traveled as quickly to the nations there are in the north of Tempest, but they seem to believe that their perched counselors are embellishing what happened at the session he attended. There is still speculation based on rumors, but he can say that for certain the members of royalty from several nations are plotting against Tempest. Then Testarossa pretty much lets Rimuru know that Moss can generate a lot of smaller body doubles of himself, and he can basically send them worldwide to use as spies and gather information. Because of this, being a Demon peer gathering intel is definitely going to be a #1 source and very trusted, and 2, very hard to take advantage of him. Then she gets a little moment of Diablo energy and she starts getting jealous of Moss being praised by Rimuru instead of her, so she starts to envy him. Then when Rimuru just asks if she can handle it, she's like, yep, we can just throw them all into ruin, which is funny as hell, but no, Rimuru doesn't want any of that. He just wants to avoid as much bloodshed as possible. And then we get a little bit of an internal dialogue, leaving the matters to basically run their own course. And he ends the panel by saying he's gonna go check them out. Who is them? You guys know exactly who. Turns out that Rimuru went to check on the kids. They had moved into Tempest, and he has very much surprised himself by the skill level of Chloe, saying that he expected to just drop in, not to have a no-holds-bar fight for his life. And that, ladies and gents, it's the painful end to another monthly chapter. As usual, an incredible chapter. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait another month of painful just sitting there doing nothing, waiting to see what else is going to be new. Obviously, some decent information was skipped in the manga chapter that was, or at least that it was handled slightly different from what the light novel did. But you guys let me know in the comment section. What did you think about the story so far? But more importantly, about this specific chapter. How do you feel the story is going? I personally think that the manga is doing a great job at adapting the light novel and expanding a little bit more in the stuff that is going to the side of the story, or at least the information that they're avoiding is not necessarily information that is going to hurt the story too much, but I like where it's going personally. I just want to know what your thoughts is. Let me know in the comment section. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys on the next video.